All right, good morning, everybody. How's it going? Welcome back. We are in Holy Week. So we have 4 days this week, and then Good Friday on Friday, and Easter on Sunday. So we're going to start today with Paul VI and the encyclical Populorum Progressio. And just as we did with Pope St. John the 23rd, let's begin with a little background on Paul VI, who is his birth name is Giovanni Battista Montini. So I'll be referring to him as Paul VI and Montini, depending on what time of life we're looking at here. So Giovanni Battista Montini was born in 1897 in Concisio, Italy, which is in northern Italy. Montini grew up in a very religious household with interests in literary and political issues. We have his father. He was a landowning lawyer and an editor of the daily newspaper. And Montini's mother was musically inclined and was also a member of the president of the Women's Catholic Action in Brescia, a city about 5 miles north of Concisio. Montini was a devout and intelligent young Catholic. The young Paul VI was educated in the Jesuit primary and secondary school. And of course, the Jesuit school, we're looking at schools that were run by the Society of Jesus, founded by St. Ignatius just after the Reformation. So they're also known as Jesuits, the Society of Jesus. St. Louis University in St. Louis is a Jesuit school. So he also attended the state school up until 1916. So he'd have been roughly 18-ish, 19 years old. Montini attended Brescia's diocesan seminary for lectures, but he ended up studying and living at home. Montini was ordained to the priesthood in 1920 on May the 29th. And he was sent to Rome to study literature and canon law, and was selected to attend the Pontifical Academy of Noble Ecclesiastics, which was the school for training Vatican diplomats. So we're going to see that Paul VI has a diplomatic upbringing. Montini served in the Vatican Secretariat of State, and he was eventually to begin teaching courses on Vatican diplomacy, and then he was eventually placed as Undersecretary to the Secretary of State, who was Eugenio Pacelli. Now we all know who he is, right? Well, Eugenio Pacelli would soon become Pope Pius XII. So Pope Pius XII appointed Montini as Archbishop of Milan in 1954. So we see that he was ordained in 1920, becomes the Archbishop of Milan in 1954. And while in Milan, Montini helped to rebuild churches that were destroyed during the Second World War, and also one of his goals in Milan was to win back the working class from the communist influences that were present. So due to some tensions, though, between Montini and the Vatican government, Pius XII did not name him a cardinal. That would take a little while longer. And after the election of John the 23rd in 1958, John named 23 cardinals, and guess whose name was at the top of the list? Giovanni Battista Montini. So after the election of John the 23rd in 1958, John named 23 cardinals and Montini's name topped the list. John the 23rd appointed Montini to both the Central Preparatory Commission and the Technical Organizational Commission for the upcoming Second Vatican Council. Now remember the Second Vatican Council, 1962 to 1965. At the death of John the 23rd, Montini was a favored successor of John, and it took 6 ballots for Montini to receive the 2/3 vote, and Paul VI was crowned Pope on June 30th, 1963. There's a couple important pieces of information about Paul VI's pontificate that I want to take a little look at, and that'll probably make up the major information for this chapter, or excuse me, for this video. And then the next video, which will be about 10 minutes, I'll look at the encyclical Populorum Progressio itself. But we have to know some things about Paul VI. So first, these important pieces was, number one, the implementation of the Second Vatican Council. Number 2 is international travel. And number 3 will be ecumenism. And I'll just make a few points about each of these just to get us a little bit of handle on Paul VI. All right, number 1 is the implementation of the Second Vatican Council, which we know ends in 1965. Now, before the end of the council, however, Paul VI will found the Synod of Bishops, established at the end of the council in 1965, and this was designed to foster a closer relationship between the popes and the bishop, or the pope and the bishops. They essentially had 5 synods that were held in Rome in order to help implement the changes of the Second Vatican Council. So we see 1965, we have the Synod of Bishops being established, and then we have a series of synods that are addressing things that need to be addressed in relation to implementation of the Second Vatican Council. So some of these councils are these synods, which are basically small bishop councils. 1967, the relationship between the primacy, that's the firstness of the Pope, and the episcopacy. 1969, dangers to the faith and revision of canon law, seminaries, mixed marriages and the liturgy. 1971, ministerial priesthood and justice in the world. 1974, evangelization. And we have 1977, catechetics. But I think for our purposes, we'll take a look at 1961 and 1969 and 1971. So in 1969, Pope Paul VI officially revised the liturgical norms of the Roman Rite. The Mass that we celebrate today, or engage in today, has its origins in the revision of the Roman Missal in 1969. The implementation of the Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy from the Second Vatican Council would probably be the most significant and visible change for the Catholic in the pew. What we notice is our liturgy is different now than if you happen to watch a YouTube video about the liturgy in 1945. It's noticeably different. So we have this sort of revolution in liturgical worship. That'll be the constant sticking point between Catholics post-Vatican II. Travel-wise, Paul VI made 9 pastoral pilgrimages. 1964, Jerusalem. 1964 again, Lebanon. 1965, New York to address the United Nations. 1967, Portugal for the 50th anniversary of Fatima. Istanbul to meet with the Orthodox Patriarch in 1967. 1968, Colombia. 1969, Switzerland to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the International Labor Organization. In 1970 is the Far East, so we're going to be having Paul VI in Sri Lanka, Jakarta, Manila, Australia. And in Manila, he actually escaped an assassination attempt by a knife-wielding painter, and he forgave him on the spot. And ecumenical relations is the last bit. Paul VI was committed to the unity of all Christians, and Paul VI had relations with the Eastern Orthodox, with the Anglicans, eventually founding the Anglican Roman Catholic International Commission, also lifting the excommunications between the Catholics and the Orthodox.